It's Adam. Welcome to the Backpack Theory Podcast, where we unpack past experiences to help define a better future. And today, we're going to be unpacking the wake-up call. My guest, Marcus Black, is a best-selling author, international speaker, man of mystery, and the podcast host of the Vitalized Podcast. Marcus, welcome to the podcast.
What up, my brother? I'm incredibly excited, elated, ecstatic to be here with you. I'm excited to be here with this community, and I'm just grateful for the conversation, man. Grateful for the connection.
Well, Marcus, I have absolutely admired you from far. It's remarkable. Whenever you have people with these talents, these voices, these just gifts, and Marcus, you just have such a phenomenal gift that I've just admired when it comes to just this God-given voice, like this God-given power, this just phenomenal skill set that you have attributed in all the areas in your life. So Marcus, why don't you tell us a little bit about what your passion is, what you're doing right now in life, and some, just some different exciting things.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, my greatest passion is people.
People.
Yeah, man. So that stems from a lot of pain, and also I can't take credit for all of it. It's the way God wired me, but just a deep burden for wanting to see people cared for, wanting to see people helped, wanting to see people have hope, wanting to see people restored. And so I'm driven by that, and that guides all of the things I do today. So, these days you can find me spending my time first and foremost with Generation Y, a local non-for-profit that is serving the next generation and pouring into youth and helping them pursue purpose, fighting bullying, fighting suicide, all of the things that are wrecking our youth. So I get to spend a lot of time doing that, building that, serving in these kids, and speaking at schools, and that's incredible. I also have been running a mentorship program in the school for 5 years now, serving kids in the inner city at-risk youth. I get to spend a good amount of time doing that. And then I also get to coach a lot of incredible people. So being a life coach, a purpose coach specifically, as well as an author coach, helping people write books, a speaker coach. So yeah, I get to do a lot of things, but they all revolve around the central thought of helping people. Like, that's what I'm here to do.
Yeah, dude, helping people. It's unbelievable. I mean, so many of us are given talents, and I feel like, especially in today, you look at the younger generation, and we're so trapped in this mindset of us. We're so trapped in this mindset of our bubble. We're so trapped in this mindset of what others think of me and allowing that to define our purpose. How are you working through some issues whenever it comes to those youth and developing those habits to let them know that they are enough the way they are and help battle some of those, those false narratives that have developed in society?
Yeah, man, it is being unapologetically straightforward about what truth is. So there are fundamental truths from God, by God, about who you and who every human being is. And when I look at these kids, they're not necessarily leaning into those truths. They are thinking about the lies that they've been told about themselves, lies from family, lies from friends, lies from adversaries or other kids who say these things about them that are not true, horrible things, labeling them that they accept as truth, and it shapes their entire narrative. It shapes their perspective. It shapes how they show up in the world. And so we have to attack the lie and replace it with truth. Attack the lie and replace it with truth.
I love that, dude. Have you ever heard of synaptic pruning?
I haven't.
So synaptic pruning is the process that all humans develop. It's how God created us, right? From the moment you're born to the moment you're 12, the majority of your synaptic pruning is actually accomplished. Basically, synaptic pruning is you have your neurons, right? And they connect to these neuro pathways to your actions, their habits, their building. And between the ages of 1 and 12, typically we build a majority of those pathways. But what's phenomenal is we will actually start picking up on habits that are positive or negative, depending on which one we exercise more. So if you have a lot of negative reinforcement, if you have a lot of negative in your life, if you have really bad role models, if you're on TikTok or Instagram or these things, and you're ingesting all these narratives and you start exercising those activities in your brain, you will actually start losing or pruning off the healthy reinforcements. So going back in and really pruning back with those youth, all of those negative and false narratives in their life from a scientific level is just so important. I look at the the term transformative or transparent conversations. There was a great article I read by a psychologist. Her name's Judith Gasser, and she talks about the effects of oxytocin production whenever it comes to our mental health. And, by anytime you are stuck or you feel like you're not understood, you have these unhealthy levels of cortisol production in your body. Well, the way you battle cortisol, or unhealthy amounts of cortisol in your body, which is the stress hormone, is by having a really big study is having co-creative or transformative conversations actually creates very high levels of oxytocin. And when you start doing that, you start building these habits. And I look at what you're doing with youth in those critical time periods, and it's so important for them to start creating these positive habits in their life so that they can carry those into the future and really affect what their children look like and what the next generation looks like, and give them that why about what they're doing.
Yeah, brother. Yeah, 100%. And I'm grateful to be able to play a role in that, helping them realize, like you talk about oxytocin, and understanding what real happiness is, the inside, but realizing they have a part to play in that. They have a part to play in their own happiness. They have a part to play in their own joy. It's not something that they're totally out of control of based upon the habits they do and the things they practice and how they love themselves and caring for themselves.
That's beautiful, dude. And you have a background in psychology, don't you? Wasn't that what you were going to do? Yeah. How long did you do that for?
So, I went to school graduated college in family systems and psychology. And then I went to postgraduate school and got about halfway. And I was going to be a licensed marriage and family therapy, LMFT. And I took issues and ethics in the helping professions, and the ethics class let me know this wasn't for me. Not because ethics aren't important, but because it was almost like, I feel like there's some natural gifting that God has given me to guide people, to lead people. My highest spiritual gift is wisdom, and then pastor shepherding is second. So when I'm looking at the spiritual gifts, these natural gifts that God have given me, I can't use any of those in that realm, because you can't say this, you can't say that, you can't say this, you can't say that, you say this, you can't say that. And I'm like, well, what can I say? How does that make you feel? And I say that facetiously. Obviously there's more to it than that, but I couldn't really exercise my God-given gifts in that avenue. So that I dropped out of grad school and started working for a mega church. Got ordained as a pastor.
That's insane, dude. Yeah, I agree. I think that have you ever read the Body Keeps Score?
Yes.
Well, it's one of my favorite books. And, you look through there and you look at a lot of the things that through psychiatry and psychology that are getting prescribed. And I mean, in my opinion, this is just my opinion, there are places for medications. Someone watching this, there are things called bridges, like SSRIs, antidepressants. There's things that sometimes you do need to take. That's why we have psychiatrists. But I believe that we are so heavily overly medicated as a society with barbiturates, with painkillers. We're trying to take things outside of ourselves to medicate this pain inside. And that pain inside, you can only do things on the exterior so much before you have to really start actually, it's, in the Body Keeps Score, they talk about it being a bridge. We have these things to bridge people to healthy lifestyles, to actually breaking those habits, creating those neural connections. And I love the fact that so you do coaching now. Is that why you went into coaching? So you could actually start building those actual long stay habits that people generate?
1,000,000%. That's exactly why I got into it, because it gives me the same ability to guide, to shepherd, to help, but I have more control over how I help, and I'm able to use many of my God-given gifts. I can use more of that into what I'm doing. So yes, 100%.
Okay. So why the subject that you wanted to unpack? Why don't you talk a little bit about that phrase and what that means to you?
I noticed one day this recurring theme. And I see this in a lot of the people that I coach, as well as a lot of the people just in general that I interact with a lot of people, lots of people online. And I keep hearing common phrases repeated, which is I just don't feel happy. I just don't feel fulfilled. I feel unhappy. I feel unfulfilled. I feel like everything is wrong. Nothing works for me. And what I've noticed is I'm like, what world are you living in? This is a question I feel, because I feel like any day you wake up in time and not out of time is a day that you are blessed and a day that life lives inside of you. And there's an opportunity for you, for something, your life could change in a moment, at any moment, as long as you're still alive.
Right.
That doesn't mean it's always going to be good. That's a fact of life. Pain is a fact of life. Like burdens, things that you go through, you're going to deal with those things. However, it's okay, because life is still beautiful, even when it's not. I have a quote. I say, life is good, even when it's not. Like on my worst day, my greatest complaint is the answer to someone else's prayers. They would trade with me in a heartbeat. Someone always has it worse than you. So with that, most people don't see it that way. Most people, I call it AMCing, right? That's Walking Dead. There's a lot of people walking dead, meaning they're just going through the motions day after day, just going through the motions. You wake up, you get ready, you go to work, you hate everything at work, you get off work, you go home, you cook, you eat, you rinse, you repeat. And you're just going through this cycle, and you're hating everything along the way. You're hating life. You're taking it for granted. And I feel like I was put on the planet to be a wake-up call, because you literally need somebody to shake you to realize life is precious. Life is so precious. Life is so good, even when it's not, even when you're going through tough things, even when you're going through hard times, there's still something to be thankful for. And so this topic is, I have my own personal wake-up call, and that shifted everything for me. And now I feel like I'm on the planet. The reason I'm still here is to be a wake-up call to everyone else that I come into contact with.
Dude, I love that. It's so powerful, and you're so right. I look at people at purpose, right? Like, have you ever found a life word?
I don't know. That's a good question.
So my life word is hope.
I love it.
So the reason that I picked the word hope, and I have my own coaching program. I told you about it. It's literally just called Solving Why. Like in our lives, like, why are we here? Outside of work, outside of career, outside of the weekend, outside of the money, outside of social media, outside of fame, outside of sex, outside of all of these things that the world tells us is going to make us happy. And it has been proven over centuries and centuries that things outside of yourself will not make you happy. It is proven over and over and over again. And me, myself in life, man, I chased things outside myself. I chased it. I have fallen. I have been broken. I have been down. I have failed so many times. And the reason that my word is hope is I really started looking at why in my life. Why did these things happen? Why did I go through that? Why am I here? Why am I having these conversations? Why do I have a podcast? And God revealed the word hope. Adam, your life is meant to go share these stories of brokenness in your life. These moments when you should have given up statistically, these moments whenever you had everything the world told you mattered. And going to people and say, hey, even though I've been broken, even though I've been down, even though I have failed, there's still hope. There is always hope. And let me be that beacon of hope of Christ through me to show you that it doesn't matter what depression, what anxiety, where you've been, that there is still hope. And if on my deathbed and at my eulogy, I tell people this all the time, I look at my eulogy. What's that person going to get up and talk about? Are they going to talk about the mansion I had? Are they going to talk about how many women I had? Are they going to talk about the house I had? If they're up there and they're talking about that, I didn't live my purpose. If they get up there and they say, you know what? There's a conversation that Adam had with me. He stopped. He took his time. He was open. He was transparent, and he shared a story with me about brokenness, and that story transformed my life. That happens one time at my funeral. Then I lived out my word.
That's good, man. That's powerful. And I love the way you function, because I'm always asking that question as well. You know, there's the book, the QBQ, question behind the question. Like, yeah, the question is, how do we find success? But the question behind it is, what does that mean? What is success? How do you define success? Like, is it monetary? Is it material? No, it's not any of that. And when people realize that happiness is an inside job, it starts from within and then without. It's a choice that you make every single day, no matter what circumstance you're in. That's why we can be living here in affluent neighborhoods and communities, and everybody walk around sad, depressed, anxious. But then I go to Jamaica and we're riding through the slums with kids playing with goats in the street and no shirt, happy as can be. And they don't have a fraction of what we have. How? Why? Because they choose. I'm alive. I can breathe. I can run. I got my health and my strength. What more do I really need?
It's impactful, dude. I had my personal trainer that was at Lifetime. His name's Jason. He came on. He talked about his dad. They're from Ghana originally. His dad's choosing to go back to Ghana to live out his senior years because the community, because the happiness, because of the oxytocin release, the lack of cortisol. Whenever you build up cortisol levels in your blood, whenever you're sitting there and you feel like you're missing out, whenever you feel like you're misunderstood, when you feel like you don't connect, whenever you go and escape, oxytocin's created through community, transformative conversations, what we're doing right now. There's so much oxytocin in this room. It's almost glowing right now. But neither one of us are high.
Yeah.
Neither one of us needs something outside of ourselves. It's just transparency.
Facts.
It's honesty.
Yes.
And it wasn't always like this for you, though.
No, absolutely not.
So let's unpack this. Let's look back. What was the moment in your life, Marcus? If someone's listening to this and they're like, man, these two guys clearly have gone through a lot of life. Clearly they're where they're at. But I just want to let you know there's a process to this. So Marcus, let's talk about your wake-up call.
Yeah, man.
When was that? Take us back to that moment.
Yeah, man. It actually happened earlier for me than most. I was 18 years of age. The year was 2004. That's actually on the cover of my book. It's really cool. So
what is your book called, by the way? Let's plug it real quick.
Asleep at the Wheel.
Sleep at the Wheel.
Taking back control of your life.
Love it.
So yeah, man, that's a whole nother story because I fell asleep at the wheel on the highway. Highly do not suggest, by the way. But chapter 4 in the book is called The Wake Up Call, and it happened at 18 years of age. And I remember like it was yesterday, man. I was kind of skating by, going through the motions. You know, I was dealing with a lot of verbal abuse, a lot of limitations placed upon me by external, the teachers and people that are supposed to support and care. But it's like, you know, they saw, instead of seeing the best in me, they saw the worst in me. And like, why don't you do work? Not knowing, like, why don't you do homework? Why don't you do your assignments? Why don't you turn them in? Why are you so unorganized? Why are you so lazy? Why? And it's like, if only you knew, like, what it looked like. And, you know, my parents did the best they could. But, you know, my dad, and we can talk about this now because he and I have a relationship. But before he had a relationship with God, he tried to fill that void with a lot of other things. He tried to fill it with alcohol. He tried to fill it with gambling. He tried to fill it with just things and things and things. And what he learned is that none of those things lead to fulfillment. All of those things lead to destruction. And so it created chaos in my home. It created anger in my home. Alcohol led to literal yelling all the time and even belittling me and tearing me down, even young version of me. And that was really difficult to try to find some form of hope, to try to find like a reason for continuing on. And so I was living my life as an inferior version of myself and going through the motions and complaining and asking why me, why me, why me, why me. And then at 18 years of age, my friends and I, after a routine night, cool, fun night, we're headed home from this Battle of the Bands youth group outing. And we're coming down the highway, 75 miles per hour. I'm in the passenger seat and I'm starting to doze off. You know, that good sleep, that car sleep.
Yeah.
And next thing you know, I just hear this boom, like this massive explosion, which is never a sound you want to hear inside of a vehicular prism. And I remember waking up frantic and my friend, and I'm like, what just happened? And he doesn't know what happened. I'm like, did the car explode? We don't know. All I know is the car starts jumping up and down. We start fishtailing and we fly off the highway at 75 miles per hour, like approaching a bridge down into this big ditch. So it's like nighttime, it's dark. We're flying through the air, like literally Dukes of Hazzards, and we fly down, car spinning around. I can feel trees slapping me in the face as my head is slinging back and forth, and I'm literally hitting my head. And then finally we hit a boom, big tree, crushed the car like an accordion. And I remember being afraid to open my eyes. I was afraid of what I would see. And all I could think is, you are about to die. without having ever lived. I knew it was over. I'm like, there's no way. There's no way we survived that. When one of my best friends, not 2 years prior, died in a car accident going half the speed on a back road, didn't hit one tree. We hit a bunch of trees, and he didn't make it. So I'm like, it's no way. We're done. And spoiler alert, I'm still here. But what I learned from that is like, okay, you're here for a reason. But then I question that because, like you said, it's a process. I'm like, are you though? So then I went to war with God because I'm like, why? I went back to why? Why me? Why did that happen to me? Why did I lose my friend? Didn't he get to live his life, but I do get to live mine? Why? Why did I go through pain? Why did I go through abuse? Why did I go through all of these things? Why did I go through toxic behaviors? Why did I get belittled by people who should have been pouring and building me up? Why me? And I got an answer to that question. And the answer, the revelation that I got was that I was never going to get a real answer to the question because the entire time I have been asking the wrong question. The question was never, why me? But the question was always, what for? Because I learned there was a purpose for my pain. For everything I went through, there was a purpose for it. I didn't realize I was being prepared to be able to go all over the world and speak life, love, and fire into people to wake them up. And that was my wake-up call.
Wow.
It was the revelation that, number one, being spared. So it was like a shaking up, realizing that life is so brief, it's so fragile, and that a moment's notice, it can be gone. Just like that, it could be gone. So I got to stop taking it for granted, and I got to make it count.
It's unbelievable. The amount of God incidences in that, from your friend having lost their life to that moment that happened to just waking up from a sleep, the analogy you could go into that, right? There's so many analogies whenever you look back at your life and like you can see this power, this thing outside of your house, your life, this greater connection, like there's something out there, like basically like you can really recognize the fingerprints all over it. It's nuts.
So you want to say unpacking? I got to tell you this part because I didn't, and I wasn't sure if I was, but I feel like it's appropriate. So when my friends and I were leaving the stadium, we were in downtown Memphis,
okay.
Right before we got on the highway. My friend and I had been arguing what teenage boys do over who gets to sit in the front seat. I call shotgun. He says, I call shotgun. I'm like, I'm bigger than you. He's like, so you rode shotgun on the way down here. So this sounds like it has nothing to do but watch this. He winds up getting in. I get in the back seat. He gets in the front seat. We get in the car. We're taking off. When we leave, we wound up stopping at the gas station because I always like a little gas station right before you get on the highway. We stop at the gas station, but we don't get gas. We don't go in the store. We don't get air in the tires. We just stop and we're sitting in this parking lot of a gas station. And I remember after we sat there for like a minute, I said, hey, buddy, we all right? I'm talking to my friend that's driving. Is everything okay? Like, are we good? He's like, yeah, I'm good. So we didn't have a reason to stop. We just stopped. And what? My friend who sat in the front seat said, hey, man, you know what? On second thought, you can have the front seat. And I'm like, I'm in here now. It's like a sports car, 2-door. I'm in here, brother. I'm good. He said, no, he just gets out. So now I have to get out. And then we trade seats. We trade seats and we hop back on the highway. We go, the story I just tell you unfolds. But what I didn't tell you is we spin while we were in the air flying Dukes of Hazzard style 180 in the air. We hit the tree backwards that sliced through the car, crushed us like an accordion. The reason that's significant, when we came up the top of the hill and we climbed up, we had to fight. I had to take the car door off the hinges for us to crawl out. We crawl up the side of this hill. This pickup truck's pulled over. He's walking up to us, a man. And he said, hey, I'm a doctor. I just got off my shift at the hospital. He had already called the police and he was able to check all of us out before the ambulance. What are the odds that the only person to see what happened to be a doctor with full stethoscope, everything? He had a full medical kit to check us out. That was first. The police come, they're running reports, and they're asking us all these questions. The doctor's science is happening in his brain. I can see it. And he says, do you boys know if that car had hit that tree head up, straight on, instead of spinning around backwards through the trunk, you'd exploded on impact and all of you would be dead. The reason, or science says, I believe in science, by the way. Science says the reason the car spin 180 in the air is because of the weight distribution in the car. So you can look at me and you see I'm not missing no meals, right? My friend who was driving was smaller than you. So I got me, I got my friend, he's driving, he's a small guy. His brother was directly behind him.
Wow.
So his brother's a bigger guy.
Wow.
And then behind him was my friend was the skinniest of all of us. He's like a skeleton. So basically, because the way we were positioned caused the car to spin, hit backwards, and that's why we're still walking today. Now, rewind your mind. I just told you we stopped for no reason and traded seats before that happened.
All right. Yeah.
You picked up what I'm putting down. That's when God became very real, 100%. That's too many coincidences for this to ain't no way. I'm like, okay, God, I got it. My wake up call. I'm in.
Do you know what I call those now?
What?
God incidences.
Yeah.
It's a God incidence.
Mm-hmm.
Dude, I've had these conversations with so many people, the way science is developing, there's a lot of weird things out there whenever it comes to the way the world works. And whenever it comes to physics, there's a big topic, I think, that's going to blow our socks off over the next 10 years in relation to physics and the way that we're created. Mm-hmm. But dude, the more intentional, I love the word intentional whenever it comes to if you're seeking, because I think so many times we think we're too busy, or we think that why would we look at the moments under a microscope, or whenever we start questioning, do I have purpose? When was the last time you really went back and looked at what got you where you're at? When was the last time you really jumped in your backpack and said, well, how did I get here? What were the circumstances? And I promise you, it gets scary. You'll attest to this. If you start looking for moments in your life, you intentionally start setting time aside to see the way your life unfolds, you're going to start seeing some real cool moments in your life. But you do have to be intentional. You got to take time.
100%.
Are you a journaler?
Not really, actually, but I am a reflector. So I don't write it down, but I spend time every day just processing, just thinking, and reflecting on how I got here. Every day I ask myself, why do I want this? And that's the only way I feel like I can protect myself from getting lost in the sauce. The bigger you get, the more successful you get. You name some of the things. I've been in Forbes, I've been in USA Today, LA Weekly, Wealth Insider. I've been on TV, I've been on the CW. I've been on all of this stuff. And there's a lot of people who, as success climbs, the less of them they know. They don't even recognize themselves. And the way I shield myself from that is every day revisiting, why? Why do you want this? Not just why are you here? Why do you want it? Why do you want what you want? Why do you show up? Why are you creating content? Why are you creating a podcast? Why are you going and speaking? And that's how I remain grounded. So
it's beautiful, dude. I personally, I've started journaling a lot. I've got 5, they're sitting over here on my desk, actually. I've got 5 different journals for 5 different reasons. Me personally, I do a lot of reflection, a lot of private times. I love journaling personally because of the areas of your brain that it activates. It activates your visual processing. It activates your memory. It starts a conversation with yourself. Me personally, that's my big thing. I actually, in my most recent training, built this process called TVI, time value index. Basically, if I break down how much time I spend on average on my top 10 weekly tasks, right? You have 140 hours a week. So if you take your top 10 things, well, sleep's number 1, then you can go through and say work, and then you kind of go through that process. And then I take the things that I value in my life, like my family, family's first, actually sleep is second. like personally, like I know my value of my sleep, diet, and then you kind of go down the list, and then you add the two numbers together, and then you basically have the whatever the lowest number is your highest value. So like for me, like sleep is number one, family is number two. Now, if I wanted to take extra time and allot it to family, it would increase my TVI based off of how much time I'm allotting. But journaling for me personally is one of the highest things on my TVI. Like it's so important for me to have that dialogue with myself to really open up and see God speak. Like there's stories that I have or thoughts or prayers or, you know, some people call them, dude, there's a lot of different terms for it. For me, it's prayer, but I'll write those down and then going back and visiting those notes years later and going, oh my God, God showed up in that minute detail that I never recognized is just so impactful for me. But you write a lot, right? I mean, you're an author.
Absolutely. I do. Like, so maybe sometimes it is journaling. I literally will pull over the side of the road on the highway and write thoughts. I write thoughts all the time, but
I look at that as journaling.
Okay.
That's my definition. Like Webster's dictionary is just expressing one's emotions and thoughts through written form.
Okay, there you go. Yeah.
So that's just journaling. Like that's what journaling is. I think journaling, a lot of people look at it as like a diary.
Yeah, I
diary.
Even I sit down, like I don't sit down at a certain time every day and I write for a certain amount of time. It's just as thoughts pop into my brain.
Right.
Like I stop and I write the thought and how it makes me feel. So it is technically, I guess it is journaling.
That is journaling. Isn't that beautiful? We just unpacked the fact that you're a journaler.
Look at that.
I want to touch on something real quick. I want to touch about your childhood a little bit.
Yeah.
Because someone's listening to this and, you know, they're listening to all these thoughts and ideas. Like what, I know that you mentioned your dad a little bit. Why don't you tell us a little bit about, you know, because you're passionate when it comes to working to kids and that shows up in what you do. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what your childhood was like that might have contributed to, like, I mean, let's just look at Marcus from like age 1 to 10. Like, what were you dealing with?
Yeah, man. When I was little, of course, you know, your earliest memories, it was fine. You know, my dad worked overnight, so he wasn't always there a lot. So he was just busy. He was working, you know, but I think the anger came later, you know, and you talking like I'm starting at 7, 8. So most of my little childhood was pretty normal. I mean, we come from a family of very humble beginnings, so I wouldn't say we were poor, but we definitely weren't whatever is above. Like we weren't middle class. We were just kind of in that lower class, but not quite poor. So it was like in between. So it was a struggle there, struggle culturally. And my parents were just fighting, trying to build a better life for us. But I think in that fight, there was so much disdain and there was so much chaos happening in my dad's world that it caused him, again, to try to fill those voids. And so when the alcohol really got heavy, the anger and the rage got heavy. And, you know, there was a lot of sad moments. There was a lot of, you know, as a kid, you don't understand these things. You don't understand addictions. You don't understand that he's not okay. And so it led to a lot of painful moments, led to a lot of tears, a lot of like, I learned to live in the future, and that's how I survived. Because I'm like, I don't know what it is, but this can't be it. I don't know what it's going to be, but I just always lived in the future. And like, one day I won't be here. One day I won't be in this house. One day I'll get to make the choices and decisions, and the choices and decisions I'll make is to never make any human being feel like I feel, as small as I feel, as insignificant as I feel in this moment.
Wow. Dude, that's deep, man. That's a lot. It's a lot in your backpack. And I mean, it makes sense. You know, I think a lot of us, you said something that I want to touch on, which I had Ben Fuller. Do you know Ben Fuller? Have you ever heard his music before?
I don't know if I have. It sounds familiar, but I'm not sure.
So I had him on my podcast. He was at the Hope is Alive event.
Okay.
And he's sang there, and I had him on the podcast because it's just super impactful story. And we talked a lot about like the generational curses and whenever it came to understanding the why behind the way your parents are and maybe the way their parents treat them. I love the fact you bring that up because that's something I think that, you know, I have a lot of friends that like, they're like, well, I don't have good friends. I don't have a good relationship with my parents anymore. Like I've disconnected. I've burned that bridge. Like, dude, you got to look back and go, a lot of times our parents, even if it was catastrophic, they were handed a certain set of cards and, you know, not in all situations, you know, I'm not going to vouch and say like what their actions, we can't condone those if they were incorrect. Mm-hmm. But like, sometimes you do got to go back and look and see like, what were their parents like what were the tools that they were given whenever it comes to that? So I like the fact that you addressed that somewhat whenever it came to your father.
It wasn't always that way. There was a period of time in my 20s and my younger years before maturity where I I hated him. I hated him for a while. That was all bad. And my mom actually was a person, it was his birthday. And she called me and said, "Hey, son, you need to call your father." And I said, "I don't." And she said, "Yes, you do. You need to call your father." And I said, "No." And so we kind of went back and forth. And she said, "You can't hate your father." And I was like, "Oh, you can say what you want to say. When you get done talking, it is what it is." And then she stops. She slowed down. She said, "Son, you cannot hate your father." And that pierced me because I'm like, I'm a child and I feel hurt and I feel sad. This is your life partner that you dreamed of building with. And you, of all of us, get the shortest end of this stick. And you're the person telling me? And so that opened my mind to realizing that I needed to figure out if reconciliation was possible, and if so, how so. And when I walked down that journey, the older I got, and then I got married, and I'm like, yo, this don't come with a manual. Like, of course, you know, we have the Bible, but it's like, there's no manual to know how to do this well. No. And then I start having kids, and I'm like, okay, there's no manual for this. And then you got kids, and they're just being kids, and they're playing, and they're screaming, and they're breaking, just doing things, what kids do. And then there's the life stress, and then there's financial stress, and I'm feeling all this pressure, and I'm trying not to lose my own mind while also trying to be the best man I can be, to be a husband, which I don't know what to do or how to do that, and also trying to be a father. And then I was able to remove myself out of my own shoes and be like, I wonder what it must have been like for him. Yeah. And when I could do that and see his humanity and not the little me who was just hopeful, you know, for care and love and support, but I could see a hurting human who was trying to figure it out. That's how we were able to reconcile.
Dude, that's so deep, man. Because you're right. It's easy for us to associate the person. We associate the action with the person. Like we blanket them. And, you know, I've really tried to. Have you ever read Phil Stutt's The Tools?
I haven't read that one, but I've heard of it.
It's really good. So he goes through a lot of these different tools, and one's like envisioning someone in love. And like if you have someone that I haven't practiced this in a while, but I'm going to give it the best thing that I can whenever it comes to like describing it. But it's basically like if someone's hurting you, if someone's lashing out, if someone's mad at you, like and you don't know why, and you want to shift your perspective, start looking at the person through eyes of love. Like just think about like the deepest part of you, and like think about the deepest part of thing, and maybe like the love that they're lacking, and then envision yourself or God, like the thing inside of you, filling that love, and then look at that love passing through them to the people around them, and then out to and it just grows and grows. And we so often want to look at the symptom. I mean, that's one of the problems with our medical system. I have one of my friends, it's funny. We were driving down and this applies in all areas of life. We're driving down the highway, and we're driving past OU Medical, and they said, "Have you ever noticed that all of the hospitals are called treatment centers?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" She's like, "Well, what is the purpose of a hospital? What is the purpose of the medical system?" And I was like, "Healing." She's like, "Yeah. They're all called treatment centers, not healing centers." And so often, I think in life, like we look at the symptoms and we just want to judge the book by its cover. We don't understand there's someone hurting behind that. We don't take the time to understand. We don't take the time to understand ourselves. A lot of people with what you went through in your childhood, it's really easy to take that and drag it into your adulthood. And then the next thing you know, your kids are acting out and your kids are angry. And then the kids around them are angry. And it produces this mass, just hurt. And so I love the way you described the way your mom just said, you can't hate your father. You got to understand, you can dislike his actions, but you got to love your dad. Because you don't start loving your dad, how are you ever going to love yourself?
That part.
That's deep, dude. That's really, really deep. How old were you whenever you started actually working through that?
24, 25.
So this was years after your wake-up call.
Yeah. So I was going and helping everybody, not him. I was like, yeah, but everybody else, I'm going to figure this out and figure out how to help.
Mm. So let's look at so you have that going on in your childhood. You're dealing with those emotions. You're dealing what was your mom like at that time, by the way? Like, was she kind of the nurturer? Did she kind of try to hide you guys? There's normally the way the dynamic works. Normally the mom's trying to hide or the dad's trying to hide from the dysfunction. Is that what she was basically?
Yeah, she was. I said I was in one of those magazines and they created this little cover art, and I said everything she is made me everything I am. Like, that was my shero. Like, for every person who told me I'd never be, she told me not only could I be, I would be. Like, it was for sure. She reminded me of the greatness that lived in me. She told me daily how powerful I was and how all the things I'm doing today, she spoke that when I couldn't see it. If you put it right in front of my face, I wouldn't be able to. If you painted the picture, if God wrote it himself like a scripture, and I would have been like, that ain't my life, you know? But she saw it, and she told me, and she built it up, and she did protect. So,
dude, that's crazy. So what was your high school like? Like, it sounds like, because it sounds to me like you have a lot of confusion. You're starting to build up this anger based off of resentment. You have a conflicting parent style in your household. So you've got one parent figure, which is your father, which is your role model, which is starting to deal with their own insecurities, their own hurts. That's starting to create this unhealthy dynamic. Then you got your mom that's trying to protect you from it somewhat. And then it sounds like you started taking on some of the anger side of things. And how long did that anger last, and what did that look like?
So I've always been good with self-control. So I was able to channel my anger into football. Football was big for me. So I built family there. I built community there. My coach became a father figure, a mentor. So I was able to really express myself that way. So because of that, I've always cared for people. So I also always been a social butterfly. So the easiest thing about high school for me was just the relationships. I cared for people well. I was popular because I was good at sports and athletics. So a lot of people loved me. I used to win superlatives at the end of every year in the yearbook. And so I was bullied when I was a smaller kid. But as I got older, I don't know. I learned this very early. This is wild to me. But I remember I was bullied badly from about 4th to 6th grade. And we didn't have a lot. So my clothes, I look at pictures of myself on those first day of school pictures. I'm like, I cringe now seeing it. But we had what we had.
Yeah.
And, kids let me have it. And they made sure I knew that we didn't have anything. And they were horrible, and because kids can be horrible. But I remember when I made it to 7th grade, and I literally one night I decided I'm not going to be the kid that gets picked on. I am going to be literally, like, it's like overnight. I just made up in my mind. I'm going to be different. I'm going to have a different life. It's going to look different. I'm going to have a lot of friends. Everybody's going to love me because I'm going to choose the way I show up. And literally, I just made up these stories, and I told people like how great I was and all of this stuff. And, you're a kid. It's an immature mind, but they followed suit. And I went from 6th grade being one of the most picked on kids with only 2 friends to his name to 8th grade being named like Mr. My school, like the most popular person in 2 years. And it was the shift happened in 7th grade. And then I realized you get to choose how you show up in the world. You allow people outside of you to dictate you and how you show up in the world. And I'm always telling people they didn't give you your purpose, so they can't take it away from you. So you don't have to allow things outside of you. Matter of fact, you cannot allow things outside of you to control you, how you show up, and the way you move in the world. Instead, it's an inner knowing who you are, what you are, why you are, and showing up with that. And then everything else follows suit. And that was a choice I made then. And so on that side of things, my school life was fine. The rest of my school, it was popular. Everybody loved me. I was that guy.
Do you feel like, you said something I agree with you. You said something in relation to, you started telling these stories.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like that was a projection somewhat? Do you feel like did you just make the stories sound more grandiose? I'm just trying to gauge what that was like.
I made up wild stories, bro.
I did too.
So I told everyone in my middle school that I was dangerous and that I was wanted in 48 out of 50 states. And I don't know what happened, but somewhere along the way, they started believing it. It's like, nobody better not mess with that dude because he's wanted in 48 out of 50 states. And so people literally signed my middle school yearbook that way, Mr. 48 out of 50. But I don't know. Maybe it was a protective mechanism to just say, like, you're not going to treat me like this. I'm dangerous, from a child's mind.
Yeah. No, I get it. Dude, I was just curious. I think I look at my life like, dude, I had a lot of shame and a lot of insecurities growing up, and I was an exaggerator. I exaggerated a lot of stories because I wanted to fit in.
Mm-hmm.
I actually, unfortunately for me in my life, I got the nickname compulsive liar at one time because I was so busy. I didn't feel like I was ever going to be in it. I was this homeschool kid. I was kind of awkward. So like trying to plug in, like I had to sound cool.
Mm-hmm.
And because I didn't feel like I was good enough, I tried to make up these stories and it worked.
Yeah.
But I wasn't ever my true self.
Yeah.
I didn't really come into my true self until I got like years later, I dug into that and I was like, oh my God, like it worked. And I learned a lot of tools and I put myself in a lot of positions, but like I wasn't my true self. I didn't project my true self.
Yeah.
Have you ever thought about that or sorted through that at all? Or like, I mean, when do you feel like you really, like, you didn't have to exaggerate anymore? When did you hit the moment where you were like, I'm me?
I don't know. That was, I feel like that ended when middle school ended. So like, I didn't take that with me into high school, but I had already, at that point, you already got the rapport. Everybody already loves you. So it's just, I was low key. I wasn't the party. I wasn't into none of that. Sports was that was it. Played all the sports, football and baseball were my biggest, track, powerlifting. I mean, so I was always busy doing that, pour myself into it and just trying to find an escape from my current reality as often as I could. And so I buried myself in the work, but I didn't really learn to appreciate me and my gifts until a lot started to change around between 27 and 30. 30 was the golden year. 30 is the year everything really changed, but it started around that 27 years of age. And there were some quotes. There was a James Baldwin quote that I heard, and that's the one. That quote was the building block. It was the foundational piece in shifting my perspective on who I am. And so the quote is, he said, it took me many years of vomiting up all of the filth that I had been taught about myself and even half began to believe before I was able to walk about this earth as though I had a right to be here. And when I read that for the first time, it's like I realized, like, you belong here. Well, where is here? Wherever I am, I belong. Because there's not a human being in existence better or worse than me. We're all equal. And it's like when I realized that, it shifted my belief in myself. It shifted my beliefs in my gifts and my abilities. It shifted everything because I realized, like, you belong here.
Wow.
And that's when I was able to be comfortable and confident in who I am, in whose I am, and able to just give that to the world.
I love that, dude. And the crazy thing is, through talking through this, it sounds like, you grew up, had a lot of insecurity. I mean, you had to have. I mean, there's so much chaos. You got your mom that's trying to foster it, but your father figure, your strength figure. You go into school, you finally hit a point where it's like, I got to start presenting something. You start going into that. Then you start escaping. Now, you found healthy escapes, right? I mean, one would argue. But then you hit 18, you have this accident, and all of a sudden you go, I got to start living. And I think a lot of people, they hit the wake-up call. They hit the moment where they're like, okay, like, I got to wake up. And then they expect for it to just change. And you're telling us 18 happened and 27 was when you were all of a sudden like, oh, I am me. God is in me. I get to live.
So you picked that up. That's interesting. And it says a lot about you. This guy is the man that unpacks all the things. This is he. Like, he's unpacking these backpacks, right? But I share all of my journey, a lot of places. And not everyone, actually, most don't ask me about the middle. That's a big gap.
It's a big gap, dude.
I was sharing this one time only. I was sharing it with a group of ladies, and I was speaking. It was a women's empowerment thing, and I told them about the humble beginnings and the pain and all of that, and then the accident and the wake-up call, and then I told them about all the stuff I'm doing today. And one lady looked confused. Everybody was celebrating. You're doing this and you're doing that. That's amazing. But this one lady said, She said, you told us about the pain and the difficulty in the beginning. And she said, you told us about the success now. She said, but what about the middle? And before I knew it, something that's like fire rose up inside of me. And I said, the magic is in the middle. And that's the first time I ever said it or even thought about it that way. But I'm like, when I thought about it, I'm like, the magic isn't what I'm doing today. And it wasn't in the difficulty in the beginning. The middle is where all the magic happened. That's where I became. And I liken that season to like me being in the wilderness. And so if you think of a wilderness season, all you see is the bad, because that was a tough time for me. I knew I wanted to help. I knew I was here for a reason. But you talk about generational curses, financial problems, running amok, not knowing how to be a husband, not being able to keep a job because the economy's crashing. And I got a degree that I paid over $100,000 for, and it's not getting me a job. So I'm in this struggle place of trying to figure out how to be a hope, how to be light, how to be love and life in the world. And I can't do that because things, external things are stopping me. I'm thinking this. This is what you're thinking. If you're not where you used to be, but you're not where you're going to be, and you're kind of in this middle ground and you're trying to figure out what to do with that. Until y'all tell you you're right where you need to be. Because even though I was in the wilderness and I was struggling and I was surviving, I learned powerful things happen in the wilderness. In the wilderness, I was being prepared for something that was to come later. I learned how to hunt in the wilderness. I learned how to fish in the wilderness. I learned how to build shelter in the wilderness. I put some tools in my tool belt in the wilderness that God knew I was going to use to impact and inspire people all over the planet. Years later, I didn't know it yet. I was being prepared for something greater. So that's what was happening. I was being refined in that season, not knowing, not even thinking. I didn't start to believe it till 10 years after the wake-up call that I was really going to go. But all of the preparation was happening there. The stories were happening there. All the stories from all the speaking engagements I do happened in that season.
It's beautiful. You know, I in my this is beautiful, dude. In the class in my coaching program, I just finished the session 3 with a company yesterday, and the thing that I told them, we went through habit stacking, time management, and goals. And at the very end of the goals part, I said the biggest win that you can have in life is realizing the fact that you will fail. You will fail. You will fall down. You will set a goal and you will not accomplish every single bit in that goal. You will fail, but it's how you handle those failures. It's what your perception is. It's what are you doing to overcome? Are you running away to escape? Are you embracing it? Are you allowing yourself to enjoy the journey, or are you too worried about the destination? We're supposed to enjoy the fruits of our labor. We're not supposed to be laboring for the fruits.
Ooh.
You have to enjoy the journey.
Yeah.
You got to enjoy the grind.
Yeah.
And then once you start getting there, you're actually equipped with the tools for greatness, because you're not equipped for the tools of greatness. And all of a sudden you make it, you fall.
Yep. It's not sustainable.
It's beautiful, man.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. That's just unbelievable. And thank you for sharing about the middle, man, because the middle is the part, the wilderness is the part that nobody sees the majority of the time. So nobody wants to see it. No. Nobody wants to realize that it takes a long time. It takes habits. It takes processes. It takes failures.
We almost wound up homeless multiple times in that. I remember the lowest moment. There was my wife and I, newborn son, 6 months old. We don't have money to feed him. And she's looking me in my eyes like, what are we going to do? And I'm like, I don't know. And I don't have an answer, no money and no way to get money, and just crying with a crying child. Like, that's the part people don't like to talk about. People saw in 21, my accounts started to blow up. My podcast, like exponential growth happened. And people are like, man, you came out of nowhere overnight. I'm like, no such thing. What you didn't see was the last 10 years of me laboring, toiling, and wrestling, trying to figure out how these gifts I know I have would be expressed.
And that, Marcus, is why the wake-up call is just the beginning. Marcus, thank you for coming on the podcast today. I love it. I got 2 questions to close out everybody with. First question would be, if there's a book you were going to recommend to someone that's listening, what would that book be and why?
Okay. So this is powerful because this book literally just released, and it's called Protect Your Peace. And it is basically one of my mentors unpacking 9 principles to help you thrive in a chaotic world. And the reason I say that one, first thing off the top of my head, is because the world is at war with itself. And I don't mean the things outside of you. I mean the people in the world are at war with themselves.
Amen.
And you have allowed your vision to become clouded. You have allowed voices of your pain, the people who have hurt you, the people who have slept on you, the people who have belittled you, the people who have mocked you, the people who have torn you down. You have allowed those things to infiltrate your mind and your heart and cause you to sabotage yourself now. You're trying to beat people to the punch of hurting you. You don't know which way is up anymore. And you are at war with your own self. In that book, he and I were talking about it when he was thinking about it. And I've gotten to see it before everyone else and revolutionize. You talk about a world of stress we live in. If you want to reduce your stress and your anxiety and increase your self-love, your self-awareness, and build belief and confidence in your skills, that's the book for you. It's by Trent Shelton. Protect Your Peace. Go get it. Do yourself a favor. Run, don't walk, and you'll see exactly why I said it.
I love it. Second question. Most impactful person in your life and why? And try to keep it short if you can. It's intentional for me to say that.
There's no possible way I can say most. I can't say one person.
Give me one that comes to top of mind.
There's 3. There's my mother, there is my wife, and there's the man who wrote the book I just named, Trent Shelton. All 3 of them believed in me before I believed in myself in different times of my life when I needed somebody to believe in me. One of my other mentors is Les Brown. He said sometimes you have to borrow someone else's belief in you until your belief kicks in. And all 3 of them believed in me when I didn't believe in myself.
I love that, dude. That's a perfect answer. Last thing, because we literally got 2 minutes. You got 60 seconds to answer this, and I have everybody do this so that we can launch this. If someone is listening to this podcast right now, they've heard it all, and they say, why a wake-up call? What does a wake-up call look like? Marcus, I want you to look at the camera and tell them why the wake-up call.
Because you matter more than you think you do. You're more significant than you think you do. And that significance that you're searching for in the world through external sources will never happen. You'll never get the fulfillment from that. You don't need anyone else's validation or approval. You were born valid. You were born significant. And if you just stand in that, you learn to lean in it, you can stop taking your life for granted because you don't get a do-over. You don't get another shot. This is your moment. This is your life. This is your season. You only got one shot, so you owe it to yourself and everybody you love to show up as the best version of yourself, making the most of this life because you can. Thank you.
I love that, dude. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. We've been trying to do this for forever now.
We have. Timing is everything. It happened when it was meant to.
I love that. Well, Marcus, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and unpacking with us. And it has just been a true honor.
Yes, sir. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me, brother. I appreciate you.
You're welcome. Till next time on the Backpack Theory podcast, it's Adam. Have a great day.